Now this is a rig presentation I haven't seen anyone use for a very long time. Now it first come to my attention back in the 90s when the pellet boom, the trout pellet boom, or pellets in many guises, really hit carp fishing for me. Sort of discovered the pellets early 90s, and when we started using them, it was evident they were deadly in the right situation. However, at times during that period, I can remember seeing incredible carp feeding frenzies with bubbles all on the surface, tearing the pellets apart. But at times I couldn't get a bite. Now it wasn't until a friend of mine many moons ago showed me this presentation, and it transformed everything. And it is a tiny micro hook bait pellet presentation that when we fished them over pellet, literally transformed our results. And from that day, it's always been a firm favourite in my armoury for the right situation. Now what I'm talking about today isn't the rig itself. Now many of you would have seen this rig on various other videos. It's my standard slip D. You would have seen it, I've spoken about it in other ESP videos. So in terms of the rig, nothing has changed. What I'm talking about today is micro hook baits for carp and for big carp also. Now it isn't anything revolutionary. When you look at many different disciplines of fishing, the match scene especially has been dominated with banded pellets for many years. Now what we don't see in carp fishing is using micro perishable hook baits. I guess it doesn't really suit the kind of bait and weight and leaving rods out for long periods of time. Now of course there are limitations to this rig, but on the flip side, when you look at how successful match anglers are with banded pellets, they're fishing for a lot shorter periods of time. The rod is in and out, and quite often they're playing a carp before they've had a chance to think about changing a new hook bait. Of course, in carp fishing, it's very different. We're casting out and leaving rods out for long periods of time. So maybe this sort of presentation doesn't come front of mind for many anglers thinking, is there an alternative to getting a quicker bite? Now, first and foremost, you can leave this presentation out for around about 4, maybe 5 hours. Now, quite often with this tiny micro presentation, I've got 3 tiny 6mm, what are these, Atlantic heat pellets tied on here. Now, with this presentation, I'm often dropping it in the edge. So I'm observing everything that's going on. And it's time of year, it's the summer, there's no better time to go stalking for carp than this particular time of the year. And this presentation is perfectly suited to that. So once you drop it in, you can visually see what's going on. Now, one thing I will say is it's also suited to static rods. And there was a recent session that I did up in the Colne Valley where I was fishing this on all 3 static rods. Now, they weren't staying out for much longer than 2 or 3 hours, and I was getting takes. But it's versatile. But one thing you won't want to do is probably leave this out any longer than 3 to 4 hours, 5 to 6 if you're dropping it in the edge. But there are also some considerations. One of them being you probably wouldn't fish this micro pellet hook bait in a lake that maybe has a high population of rudd or roach, because they obviously will peck at pellets and it's probably not best suited for that. And of course, if you've got crayfish present, then an alternative hook bait like an artificial hook bait would be more suitable. Now in terms of attaching the pellets, it couldn't be simpler. All you're going to need is some super floss, a lighter and a pair of scissors. Now I simply play off a bit of super floss, probably 6 to 8 inches long, and I simply thread that through the eye of the micro swivel. In terms of how I attach the pellets with the knot, it's a simple overhand loop knot in the super floss to start with. And then I put one pellet in the loop and pull it down tight. Now with an overhand loop knot, it doesn't go back on itself, it doesn't loosen, so it simply lassos the first pellet in place. Now what you're left with then is 2 tag ends of super floss, so you simply repeat the process. You tie another overhand knot in the super floss, pop a little 6mm pellet in and pull it down tight. And again, repeat the process for the 3rd pellet, but this time when you pull it down tight, I simply snip off the tag ends and blob it with a lighter. And what you'll see is the super floss kind of gets that sort of see-through look where it's gripped onto the pellet. Now I think one thing that benefits this rig, and it enables you to fish these pellets out longer than maybe you would if they weren't flossed, is the floss sort of almost keeps the pellet structure together that little bit longer, which is vital for when you want to leave it out obviously in the lake. Now, as I said, I'm using 6mm pellets. Water temperature does affect breakdown of pellets. That's one thing to consider. I mean, we are in the height of summer, but like I said, I've left these out for 4 or 5 hours, no problems at all. But once they're blobbed on like that, simple case, we're going to find some carp and lowering it in.